Is there a continuation of the Nephilim Wars today that we're seeing splash all over the front page of our newspapers, plus a strange prophecy concerning the Pope? We're going to be digging into that, plus sovereignty wins over Jerusalem. We'll show you that video. UK researchers are using geoengineering technology that they're calling Satan. We'll show you a clip of Russell Brand talking about that, and what did happen to the Malaysian flight MH370? There's video that's purported to be true of these strange orbs flying around the aircraft just before it disappears. We're going to show you that, but we're going to dig deep into some other questions as well. What is the Ganymede Code? Demonic portals over Mount Hermon? Are there demonic portals over Washington, D.C.? There's a lot we're going to get into, and there's only one person I would want to talk to about these things. We have a very special guest who's with us for the first time, but before I introduce him, I want you to introduce yourself right there where you are. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and as we dig through this, if you want to contribute to the conversation, make sure you put 4 question marks before your comment. If it's a question or a comment you'd like us to read, either way, put 4 question marks in front of the comments so that Evan, who's always watching, can see it. Evan, are you watching the comments?
I am watching, and I think Jeff was actually our first comment of the day. Congratulations, Jeff. He said, good morning from Utica, New York. Always good to see you, Jeff. We got Tanya from Georgia. We got Amanda from Tennessee. We'll be heading out to Tennessee here soon, actually. Kim, good day from Pennsylvania. Lynn, watching from New York. Got a lot of New York represented in the chat. Let's see. Yvette from Connecticut. Carolyn from Florida. Tina from Virginia. We got Retha. Great to see you. Stephen from Alabama, Coleman County, Alabama. We got Lauren from Idaho. We got Scotty says, Holland with the Holy Ghost. Love you guys. We love you, Scotty. Thank you. Carolyn, hey, good to be here. Welch, can a bishop be a pope like him? I don't know. Bishop Allen for pope. I'm just kidding.
Should I put my name in the hat?
I don't know if I want to see you in that hat.
Have you seen the video of the orange smoke coming out of the Vatican and a new pope being announced, and Trump comes out in the whole outfit? I think the press was super upset about that. No, we're so thankful to have all of you here, especially those of you that are driving. Truckers on the road, we love our truckers. You are the life's blood of this nation, and thank you for being a part of this conversation. But let's dive in, Evan. And again, you can be a part of the conversation. Just add 4 question marks to your comment, and we'll be sure to read it if we can before this program ends. But I've got with us an author, a prolific author. I'm looking at the books: The Second Coming of Saturn, The Great Conjunction, America's Temple, and the Return of the Watchers. And then we have, let's see, Last Clash of the Titans, The Second Coming of Hercules, Leviathan, and the Prophesied War between Jesus Christ and the Gods of Antiquity. And then we've got the latest book, The Gates of Hell, Unlocking the Ganymede Code and the Demonic Portals of Mount Hermon and the United States Capitol. We're going to put a link to this in the description. We're so thankful to have such a prolific author and prophetic voice to this generation. Would you welcome with me Derek Gilbert to Encounter today for the first time? There he is. Hello, brother.
Hello, Alan. It's an honor to be on your program.
It's so good to have you. We got to meet at our good friends on Skywatch. We were on the set there, and I fell in love with you and your wife and the wealth of information. You are a walking encyclopedia of the strange and unusual. That's what we love about you.
I have been called strange and unusual many times throughout my life, but I'm just thankful the Lord's found a way to use the weird wiring up here for something productive and useful and hopefully edifying.
So much productive and useful random information up there. We were on the program, and they asked me about one of the chapters in my book called The Philadelphia Experiment. And I had a little bit of brain fog for a second, and I was like, oh, yeah, what was the Philadelphia Experiment? Derek, what was the Philadelphia Experiment? And you said, actually, last month we were at the convention of, and you began to talk about, you were actually there, you had all the information, so you saved me. You saved me in that moment. But we're excited to talk to you.
Well, it's an honor to be here. This is the kind of work that Sharon and I, looking back over the course of our lives, we would not have predicted that we would be where we are now, but looking back, you can see how the strange twists and turns have led to this moment. I've always been interested in figuring out how things work, and I guess I get that from my dad, who was an engineer. But the path, I was a top 40 radio disc jockey for a number of years, and then went into real estate sales. And then, through various events in the course of my life, was compelled to dig into apologetics, the reasons by which we know that the Word of God is true and has been accurately preserved for the last 2,000 or 3,000 years. Sharon, likewise, was a professional vocalist for many years, singing with bands, jingle singing, and touring with a contemporary Christian group. Then she went back to school, got a degree in molecular biology with an emphasis in genetics. So you could just imagine in divine council, the throne room of God and the Lord saying, okay, watch, I'm going to bring these two together, the old disc jockey and the rock and roll singer, and they're going to be working on writing books of theology. Lord, are you sure? Trust me. So,
well, again, we've got a link in the description to the latest book, The Gates of Hell, which you two write together. You two write together these books, and the research is outstanding. Plus, in addition to this, I need to mention also, guys, in the description, we're putting a link to a book by Thomas Horn and Chris Putnam called The Final Pope is Here, Petrus Romanus. And this goes through the details of some of what we're going to talk about here today. So I thought it'd be appropriate to make that available as well in the description of this video if you want to build your library with some fun reads like this. So I want to talk to you about the prophecy of the popes. And guys, in a moment, we will get to video of sovereignty winning over journalism, UK researchers, geoengineering technology called Satan. And we'll show you video of the missing flight MH370, purportedly the moment it goes missing. So we're going to show you that video as well. But first, there's a lot happening at the Vatican. Before we get into the prophecy of the popes, what's the latest now on the development? Now their mourning is over. Now they're going into the process of selecting the next pope. What do you know about what's happening, Brother Derek?
Well, it's a very secretive process. It'll begin tomorrow with the cardinals in Rome who have all arrived. They'll be essentially locked in and will conduct their ballots, no more than, I think, 2 per day. And again, I'm not an expert on the process, but there's a movie out there right now based on a novel that was written, I think, 2016 called The Conclave. And the movie stars Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and some other well-known actors. And according to what I've read, many of the details in that movie are accurate. What's going to happen, and it's sad, but this is the way it's been ever since becoming Pope became a career objective for people who should be ministering to the flock. There will be a lot of politics behind the scenes. There are 133 cardinals. Any of them who are under the age of 80 can vote for the next pope, the successor to Francis. And of the 133, 108 of them were appointed by Francis. So it's not likely that the conservatives in the Roman Catholic Church will get what they want. And there's a growing number of very vocal conservatives who were alarmed at the direction that Pope Francis was taking the Roman Catholic Church. He was very liberal.
Yeah.
But again, the majority of the cardinals, again, 108 out of 133 who are there in Rome for the conclave, are his appointees. The other interesting thing about this, and this is something I didn't learn until yesterday, again, not being Roman Catholic, I'm not as up to speed on what is going on inside the church, and I should be, because this, after all, affects 1.3 billion of the world's 2.3 billion professing Christians. That's 60% of the world's Christians.
Wow.
Are Roman Catholic. In 2018, Francis agreed to a secret deal with the Chinese Communist Party, which gave the CCP some control over who gets appointed to be bishops over the 12 million Roman Catholics in China. And it also withdrew Vatican support for the underground Roman Catholic Church in China, those who did not want to operate with the approval and the control of the Chinese Communist Party. So there are those who are now taking this opportunity to say the next Pope should revoke the deal and return to supporting the underground church, which is trying to follow more closely the teachings of Jesus, certainly without the influence of the Chinese Communist Party, which is atheistic. They're really more nationalistic, and that's what they're trying to impose, not just on the Roman Catholic churches in China, but Protestant churches as well. The thing is that China has already kind of dangled an olive branch out there, if you will, saying we want to continue the good relationship with the Vatican. And of course, the guy who was responsible for negotiating the deal is the Secretary of State in the Vatican. That's the second most powerful office inside the Vatican. It's Cardinal Pietro Parolin. He's the one who cut the deal. He's a leading candidate to be the successor to Francis. And since he's the one who made the deal with China, it's not surprising that the Chinese are sort of hinting, not very subtly, that they want him to be the next pope.
Interesting. And that name's going to be important. We're going to come back to him here in a moment because it's interesting when we look at the prophecy of the popes. For those who aren't familiar with the prophecy of the popes, which is discussed again in the final pope is here, Petros Romanos, in this amazing book. The link is in the description of this video. Can you summarize that for us?
Yeah, the prophecy of the popes is ostensibly, it is claimed to be a prophecy by a medieval Irish monk by the name of Saint Malachy, who created a list of 112 popes, and the last of these 112 would be called Peter the Roman, and he will basically preside over a time at the end of the age when Rome will be destroyed, and essentially just it'll be the end of very, very apocalyptic. Now, the 111th Pope, Glory of the Olive, was interpreted to be Benedict. So when Tom Horn and Chris Putnam, both who've been called home by the Lord now, wrote Petrus Romanus, it was speculated that the next Pope, which is Francis, would be Peter the Roman. But there's some wiggle room in the interpretation that maybe there's a gap between number 111, Pope Benedict XVI, and number 112, who is Peter the Roman. And again, as you mentioned, Cardinal Pietro Peter Parolin, leading candidate to be the next pope. Now, here's the thing about the prophecy of the popes. It was accurate in its predictions of the popes, the descriptions, which are kind of cryptic. Again, Benedict was supposed to fulfill the prophecy of the glory of the olive. These were accurate up until about the year 1597. And there's a belief by scholars that this prophecy was actually a early 17th, late 16th century work, which is why it was so accurate from the 11th century down to the 16th. The question then is, how is it that the popes from 1600 onwards often fit with the descriptions of the prophecy of the popes? Is it that somebody actually was given a vision of something? If so, by whom? Was this an angel of God who revealed it to whoever wrote this? Because it wasn't Saint Malachy. It's probable that it was written in the late 16th, early 17th century. Or is it that the Roman Catholic Church was deliberately voting for candidates for pope who would fulfill the popes in the line of the prophecy popes? I don't know the answer. And again, the question is this a legitimate prophecy from God, or was this something that the fallen realm, principalities, powers, cosmic rulers over this present darkness, want us to think, or want the Roman Catholic Church to think, as the largest body of professing Christians on earth? Again, that's a question we'll probably only know the answer to in retrospect. Now, is the next pope Peter the Roman? It doesn't appear that Francis presided over the destruction of Rome.
Right.
So is the next one Pope number 112, or is there a longer gap before we get to Peter the Roman? Or can we just ignore this prophecy and say, now this is really nothing that we need to concern ourselves with? Again, we'll know the answer someday, but probably not today.
And there's been multiple times kind of a division of where there were two popes at the same time. And
right, a pope and an anti-pope.
Yep, were those legitimate? And since the last pope resigned under unusual circumstances, and maybe you can speak to that here in a moment because it's fascinating, he resigned, and so that one of our commenters said, could it mean that disqualifies him as the one, and now we're about to step into the 112th pope? That's an interesting question someone just said in the chat. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, again, it's possible, and again, it may be that we're looking for ways to make this fit reality. This, again, could just be a false prophecy that was given to somebody, again, in the late 16th century, early 17th century. And the Roman Catholic Church was trying to fulfill it by picking candidates who seemed to fit the prophecy? Again, I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, it was strange that Pope Benedict XVI resigned, first one in 600 years back in 2013. And he said, and again, this was predicted by, or some would say prophesied by Tom Horn. Tom, having known him for 15 years before his passing, he always said, I'm not a prophet. I do not claim to be a prophet. I don't claim to have that kind of accuracy. But this was something that was a very vivid dream. And when he had those, they often came to pass. And he predicted the resignation of Benedict a year before it happened. Now, he did that publicly. So when the date came and went, there were people who said, okay, well, just one more Christian making a false prophecy, except that it later came out that Benedict did resign exactly when Tom said he would. It's just they kept it private until they were ready to make the official announcement a month later. And then, of course, everybody in the world wanted to get a hold of Tom Horn to find out what else he might know about what was coming. But yes, Benedict resigned in 2013, claiming he wasn't feeling well, but then he lived on another 9 years. So,
yeah, highly unusual as a pope who supposedly was uprooting corruption and finding all kinds of financial problems, even human trafficking, exposing human trafficking, and then he's kind of forced out. And lightning struck the Vatican the night that he officially resigned, which is fascinating. So, when we say Petros Romanos, was there anything else in the description of the 112th Pope, and what exactly does that mean?
Well, as I understand it, the final Pope, and Tom and Chris followed this up with their book, The Final Roman Emperor, which looked at another prophecy. And again, I'll use that term loosely. It was an apocalyptic work from the 8th century AD that was attributed to a 4th century bishop named Methodius. So it's the apocalypse of pseudo-Methodius, which prophesied that a future Roman emperor, the final Roman emperor, would lead the forces of Christendom to victory and establish the rule of Christ over the entire world. Now, this was written in response to the sudden rise of Islam in the 7th century. Muhammad died in 632. By 636, excuse me, we got a very high pollen count here in the Ozarks.
We can relate in the Carolinas, yeah.
Sure. The armies of Islam came out of Arabia around 636. There was a very critical battle near the Sea of Galilee called the Battle of Yarmouk, which is a river that runs into the Jordan just south of the Sea of Galilee. And that broke the military power of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, in the 7th century. And after that, then Christendom was basically there for the taking. And within 100 years, Islam had overrun all of the Middle East, all of North Africa, had crossed the Straits of Gibraltar, taken all of Spain. They were halfway across France by the time Charles Martel, who was the king of the Franks, later the French, defeated the Muslims at the Battle of Tours in the year 732. So this was such a shock to Christendom that this pseudo-Methodius, the apocalypse of pseudo-Methodius, and this prophecy of a final Roman emperor, a final leader of Rome, who would presumably coincide with this Peter the Roman, the final Pope of Rome, in leading the world back to Christ. And of course, the irony is that in response to pseudo-Methodius, suddenly the prophecies, the Islamic prophecies of the Mahdi came about. Because the Mahdi is not mentioned in the Quran at all. It's mentioned only in the hadiths, which are the sayings of Muhammad, ostensibly, that were passed along to his followers and then collected after Muhammad's death. So you've got a prophecy, a false prophecy, in response to another false prophecy that are now affecting the world in the 21st century. Because when you look at polls of what Muslims believe, the Pew Research Center has done this, you find that a majority of the Muslims in the Middle East believe that the Mahdi will arrive in their lifetimes, which means presumably within the next 30 or 40 years. So again, you've got a false prophecy in response to a 7th century false prophecy that are guiding Sunni Muslims especially to do what they do. The Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and their offshoots, the Muslim Brotherhood, things like that. It is really strange. And I think when we step back and look at any prophecy or so-called prophecy outside the Bible, we have to consider, okay, is this manipulation on the part of the fallen realm?
Wow, and especially when you consider there's another percentage of the Muslim community who thinks they can hasten the arrival of that Messiah-like figure by setting the world on fire. That's a smaller percentage, however, significant enough that it includes millions of people who believe that that's a possibility. And all of this is happening at the same time as Klaus Schwab, for example, steps down from the WEF or allegedly is forced to step down from the WEF, the World Economic Forum. Have you gotten any news about what's happening with him?
Well, Schwab was under investigation by the board of directors of the World Economic Forum because it was coming out that Schwab and his wife Hilda had been using the World Economic Forum as their own private piggy bank. He was, Schwab allegedly, we have to say, was sending employees of the WEF out to ATMs to take out thousands and thousands of dollars for his own personal use. He was using WEF funds, allegedly, for private in-room massages at the hotels that they were staying at. His wife Hilda, allegedly, was using, was setting up meetings. You know, we're going to have a meeting in Monaco or whatever, you know, and they'd get one or two people together, and that way she could write it off as a WEF expense. The WEF, for the use of the Schwab family, bought a $20 million or $30 million resort property, luxury villa overlooking Lake Como in Switzerland. Beautiful setting, and then spent another $20 million renovating it for mainly their use. So this guy, over the last 50 plus years, because he was the founder of the World Economic Forum, has been bringing people together to facilitate the cause of globalism and using it to line his own pockets. I mean, the irony here is this is the group that very famously or infamously released a series of videos a couple years ago. And one of the predictions of things that will happen by the year 2030. And one of them is that we will own nothing and we'll be happy. So we'll rent everything that we need, which, you know, they never explain who's owning the stuff that we're renting. But the Schwab family didn't seem to have a problem with
owning a lot of things,
ownership. Exactly. So the question is then, who wanted Schwab out? He'd already announced that he was going to step down. He's 87 years old. And he was going to stay on until a permanent replacement had been found. But then over Easter weekend, he was notified by the board that some anonymous whistleblowers had brought these matters to the attention of the board of directors, which included people like Al Gore and the current director of the International Monetary Fund. So, you know, for some reason, the cellist Yo-Yo Ma is also on that board of directors. I don't know how he got in there, but whatever. So they announced to Schwab, hey, we're going to do this investigation. Schwab said, well, that's it. Fine. I'm going to take my marbles and go home. And he quit, but also threatened to sue anybody who would actually make public these allegations. So somebody else wants control of the World Economic Forum and its direction. Is it possible that they saw that their influence was decreasing because of the rise of nationalist movements in places like the United States and Donald Trump and his supporters, Italy, Hungary, Romania, Germany, where, as we're recording this or broadcasting today, rather, the conservative party there, Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, is now running neck and neck in the polls with the Christian Democratic Union, the CDU. And they've got a bit of a tangle. You've also got the National Front in France. So people who are wanting to put their own nations first instead of this globalist agenda are gaining political power, and the globalists are fighting tooth and nail to try to hang on, which is why you see lawfare being used. We've seen it over the past 5 years here in the U.S. with all of the legal problems that were presented for Donald Trump. Benjamin Netanyahu is facing the same thing in Israel. Anyone who stands in the way of this globalist agenda, I would suggest that this is because of the principalities and powers behind the scenes trying to build the infrastructure for a future one world government, are desperately trying to hang on to this power because people like Trump, Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Orban in Hungary, Le Pen in France, Nigel Farage in the UK are getting in the way, and they're slowing down the move toward what they see as the kingdom of Antichrist.
Any speculation as to who might be jockeying for position, and have they wised up in the sense that they're not going to put somebody at the head of the WEF who is actually a person of power, but that it'll be just merely a puppet who can take all the barbs and all the hits, and while they continue to do their thing behind the scenes?
I haven't seen any speculation on that as of yet. It's just been a couple of weeks, so it will be interesting to see who emerges. I know that the interim CEO is the former CEO of Nestle, who said publicly that access to clean drinking water should not be a basic human right. Now, if you've ever been to the Middle East, you know that Nestle supplies a lot of bottled drinking water to places where there's not much clean water. Every time we go to Jordan, for example, to go to Petra or Amman or some of the sites there, you find out very quickly when you go to a restaurant, you're not getting free water on the table. You pay a couple bucks a bottle, and you've got to buy it because they just don't have any. And Nestle controls a lot of that market. So you get rid of one Bond villain and you put another guy in charge.
Okay, so I mean, this is why we have you on the program, because a wealth of information, guys. Those of you watching online, Evan's looking at your comments.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying this conversation, Evan? What are they saying?
We got a question real fast, and I want to add a little bit to it if I can. But Priscilla said, do you think it's a coincidence Mahdi arrived on the scene around the time Klaus Schwab stepped down, the death of Pope Francis, the coming election of the new pope, and what is happening in Israel? And my addition to this question is, what is the Mahdi? Is that a title? Is that a person? What is that?
Mahdi is a term that means rightly guided one. And again, the character of the Mahdi was created by Muslims in response to this prophecy, supposed prophecy of the final Roman emperor. Again, Christians were trying to figure out, why is God allowing Christians to be slaughtered, enslaved, and looted and turned into second-class citizens? Why is God allowing this tragedy to befall us? And so this apocalypse of pseudo-Methodius was a way to say, don't worry, there's a day coming when a final Roman emperor will emerge and wipe out the Mohammedans, and we will once again make the world ready for Christ's return. And then the Muslims basically came back and said, oh yeah, well, the Mahdi is going to come and he's going to take the world. Okay. Now, there are different conceptions of who or what the Mahdi is. Sunni Muslims make up about 80% of the world's Muslims. The other 20% are Shia Muslims. And then within those two main divisions, you've got subsects. I'm not an expert on Islam, but I did write a book called Bad Moon Rising on the spiritual forces behind Islam. So I had to do a little study on this.
That's a good song, too.
The Shias believe that the Mahdi will return when Allah wills it, not one heartbeat sooner. And there's nothing that they can do to bring the Mahdi any faster. Sunnis, on the other hand, and remember, they're 80% of the world's Muslims, they believe that anyone who can muster a big enough army, collect enough guns, can declare himself the Mahdi and then wage victorious global jihad. And throughout the last 1,400 years of history, there have been any number of self-proclaimed Mahdis. Al-Baghdadi, who was the founder of the Islamic State back in 2014, was believed by many to be the most recent Mahdi. Thing is, between Sunnis and Shias, they're likely to see the Mahdi of the other sect as the Dajjal, which is their version of the Antichrist. Because Sunnis and Shias, that was at the heart of the civil war in Syria over the last 14 years, started in 2011. Sunnis wanting to get revenge on Shias. The former dictator of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, was an Alawite, which is a sect of Shia Islam. They're a minority, but they put together a coalition between the Alawites, Christians, and Druze, which is neither Muslim nor Christian nor Jew, and they were able to rule over the majority Sunni population. Civil war, you got Sunnis and Shias fighting each other, and both sides thinking they're fighting for their Mahdi. So it gets really convoluted, and how this plays out in the end times, not quite sure, actually, because you got 1.6 billion Muslims on planet Earth. Any end time scenario that doesn't figure on how they play a role is missing a big piece of the puzzle. My personal feeling is I think Muslims will be, sadly, and I'm not saying this with any joy, that they will be used as cannon fodder. I mean, from the enemy's perspective, and by enemy I mean principalities, powers, fallen angels, if you will, they're already in their camp.
Wow.
So if they can be used to deceive Jews, especially because they control Israel, which is where this battle will end, and Christians into following the wrong man, I think that's the role that they will play. Now, I know the questioner had asked about the arrival of the Mahdi. I don't believe that this guy, Abdullah Hashem, who's been all over social media here the last few weeks, ever since the death of Pope Francis, claiming to be the successor of Peter, the successor of Jesus Christ, the true and legitimate Pope. He's just the leader of a cult. He's a guy from Mooresville, Indiana, which is a suburb of Indianapolis. And you can find this, you just do a little digging online. It doesn't take much to find it. He was a student at and Sharon's from Indiana, so I can actually speak to this with a little knowledge. They used to call it Ooey Pooey, Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Now it's just IU Indianapolis. But Hashem was a student there. His dad is Egyptian, his mother's American. And he and a buddy of his named Joseph McGowan, they have created a religion called the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. And it's really a Gnostic, it's like a supernatural smoothie or a spiritual smoothie. It mixes in some Islam and some Gnostic teachings and some Judaism. They teach that Jesus didn't actually die on the cross. Well, his body did, but his soul was transferred. He swapped souls with Simon of Cyrene, and then Jesus went off with Mary Magdalene and gave birth to a guy named Mani, who was the creator of a sect, Gnostic sect called Manichaeism, ignoring the fact that Mani was born in the 3rd century AD, like 200 years after the crucifixion. It's a very strange sect. But being a filmmaker, he's got really good production values on his videos. And so suddenly when he comes out with these videos, people are paying attention. It's like, could he be the Mahdi? No, he's not the Mahdi. He's not the Antichrist. He is an Antichrist,
yes,
but he is not the Antichrist.
Yeah, that's a key distinction. But it's interesting that we're seeing the prominence of such a small individual, part of such a small movement, now through the means of social media, is able to have a global stage, and the whole wide world is now talking about him. It just goes to show how quickly someone can become. I don't know if you have any video footage, Evan.
I think I just found some. We'll
just so people know who we're talking about. Here's video footage of the guy. Go ahead and hit play.
I am Abdullah, the successor of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, the successor of the Comforter Ahmed, the successor of Simon Peter, the successor of Muhammad, the successor of Jesus Christ. I am the true and legitimate Pope. I am the proof upon the Christians. I am the son of the Muslims.
You get the idea. Yeah, you get the idea. So he is an Antichrist, obviously, and the rise of Antichrist is going to increase until the real one takes the stage. And you talk a lot about these things in your writings, guys. His books are amazing. Links to his resources are in the description of this video, particularly The Gates of Hell, the Unlocking the Ganymede Code. Now, for the record, those of us on here, we have kind of a more, traditional conservative view of demons, that they're fallen angels. You go deep into this and the origin of demons, stuff like that, and I don't have any problem with that. I think it's a fascinating conversation, and I love having the conversation. But what exactly is, as you dig into this, you talk about portals over Mount Hermon, the United States Capitol. And guys, we're going to segue from this into the current battle in Israel with the Palestinians in the West Bank and all the stuff that we're dealing with. Is this an ancient war, the war of the conquest of Joshua, being continued? We're going to talk about that in a moment. But can you talk to us a little bit about the Ganymede Code and why you wrote this particular book, The Gates of Hell?
Yeah, we have come to believe over the last 5-6 years, and we've been to Israel 4 times in that since 2018, that where Jesus did what he did is just as important as what he did when he was there. The gates of hell obviously is a reference to the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus takes his disciples to Caesarea Philippi and asks them a couple of questions. Who do people say the Son of Man is? And they have a number of answers. And then he says, but now who do you say that I am? And Peter says, well, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus confirms this, saying, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood. In other words, some guy didn't tell you this, but by my Father in heaven. This was divine confirmation. Yes, I am the Messiah. And then Jesus engages in some wordplay. I say you are Peter, you are Petros. And on this rock, this Petra, recognizing that they're standing in front of a 9,200-foot mountain.
Yes.
That was essentially the Canaanite Mount Olympus. It's where they believed their gods met, and where their creator god El, who was the father of the 70 gods, 70 being a symbolic number, meaning all of them. Okay, every last one, not a single one left out, the complete set. All the gods are the sons of El. That was Mount Hermon. So at the base of Mount Hermon, next to this big cave that 2,000 years ago was the main source of the Jordan River, the water coming out there. In the first century, the Jewish historian Josephus wrote that no one had ever lowered a plumb line long enough to hit bottom. They believed it was literally a bottomless cave that obviously was a connection to the netherworld. And so when they're standing there, bearing in mind that Caesarea Philippi was a pilgrimage site for pagans, there was a temple there to Jupiter, there was a temple there for the Roman emperor, there was a temple there, a healing center for the demigod Asclepius, the son of Apollo. Jesus walks his guys there 30 miles from his base of operations at Capernaum. That's like a 14-hour hike in sandals across rough terrain. So you got to want to go there to make a specific point. And he says, on this rock I will build my ecclesia, my church, my congregation. And the gates of hell, which is the really big cave right over here.
Yeah, there it is.
That's the cave. It's dry now because earthquakes over the last 2,000 years have shifted the place where the water for the Jordan comes out further away from the mountain. But 2,000 years ago, the water would be flowing out there, and it was believed that was literally bottomless. Jesus said, the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Now, why did he do it there? Because, again, this was a pagan cult center, and everybody in the ancient world had known for thousands of years that this was a sacred site for the Canaanite father god El. Then, according to Matthew, 6 days later, he climbs a very high mountain, which in that area could only have been Mount Hermon, with Peter, James, and John, and he's transfigured. So he basically was issuing a challenge into the spirit realm to these fallen angels. So that was the reason that we chose the title, The Gates of Hell. But our point is that the gates are right here in us, okay? Your heart, whatever you open yourself up to, can be a portal to this other world. Now, Jesus could have walked his guys there and said, hey, I know everybody thinks this is an entrance to the netherworld. That's fake news. This is not how the supernatural world works. But he didn't do that. He walked his guy. They climbed a 9,000-foot mountain just so that he could declare his divinity there on the summit of that mountain. Why not do it at Mount Tabor, which is like only 3,000 feet? Why not do it in the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which was where the religious hierarchy of the day was based? We argue in the book it's because that region north of the Sea of Galilee, the Upper Galilee and the region of Bashan, was enemy territory. For thousands of years, that area had been what was known, not just to the Jews, but to the neighboring Canaanites, as a place dedicated to the gods of the earth, which was a term applied to the Rephaim. We know from Canaanite texts that they venerated these spirits. They were called Rapayuma in the Canaanite dialect. And that region north and east of the Sea of Galilee, basically the Golan Heights today, has so many of these megalithic structures devoted to the cult of the dead, called dolmens, but also sites like Gilgal Rephaim, which they refer to as the Israelite Stonehenge, Israel's Stonehenge. And there are a number of other locations, at least 12 other locations like Gilgal Rephaim, similar, giant rings of stone around a central core.
Evan, look that up, the Gilgal Rephaim, so people can see what he's talking about there.
Got it.
It's massive. You can see it on Google Earth, meaning it's visible from space. It's 500 feet across. And they estimate about 60,000 tons of stone moved to create this thing. By contrast, Stonehenge, they estimate at about 2,500 tons of stone. So 60,000 tons of stone, probably created around 3,700 BC. So long before Jesus walked the earth. I mean, we're talking as much time between Abraham and us today as the creation of Gilgal Rephaim and Jesus.
Wow.
So that's what was on the Golan Heights, the ancient kingdom of Bashan, Og of Bashan. And Jesus based his ministry there. In fact, we make the case in the book that Jesus was baptized north of the Sea of Galilee, east of the Jordan River. John chapter 1 gives us the clues where we see that John was confronted by scribes sent by the hierarchy in Jerusalem, the Sanhedrin, to ask John why he was doing this, this baptism of forgiveness, for the baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. These things happened at Bethany across the Jordan. Well, there is no Bethany anywhere in the Holy Land except for the one on the Mount of Olives. But across the Jordan or beyond the Jordan means east of the Jordan River. Well, a scholar back in the 19th century named Claude Condor wrote that the Greek is Bethania, which was probably just a transliteration of the Latin name for that region in the ancient world, Botania, which is Bashan. Bashan across the Jordan. And when you read further after Jesus is identified by John the Baptist, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, Andrew, one of John's disciples, goes and gets Peter, John, Philip, all from Peter, Andrew, and Philip, all from Bethsaida, which is north of the Sea of Galilee. That region, again, enemy territory. And Jesus basically declared war on these demonic spirits, and it is our contention. This was the belief, by the way, of the Jews of Jesus' day and the early church, that demons were the spirits of those giants, the Nephilim, destroyed in the flood of Noah, and that their cult was centered in ancient Bashan.
Wow.
Jesus went there specifically for baptism, declared his divinity there, performed many of his miracles there. It was not by accident that he chose that location.
And you can see the depth, guys, that he goes into in this book of all of that. And so you highlight the Ganymede Code. What are you referencing when you talk about that?
Well, Ganymede was a minor character in Greek mythology. He was the son of the king of Troy, and he was carried off to Olympus by Zeus in the form of an eagle, and where he became a cupbearer to the gods. And it all sounds wonderful. That's how it's taught in high school mythology. But it's a little darker than that. Zeus actually took him because he was a very handsome youth, and Zeus didn't much care whether he swung both ways. Let's put it that way. On the underside of the dome, inside the United States Capitol, there's an area there called the Oculus, and then there's a painting inside that circle called the Apotheosis of Washington. Now, the Oculus means eye. This was inspired by the Pantheon, which is a building in Rome built during the reign of Caesar Augustus. That Oculus was actually open to the sky, and it symbolized the portal through which the spirit of Caesar would ascend to become one of the gods. Well, they didn't leave it open on the United States Capitol. There you see the image there. But you still have that concept, the Oculus, showing a vision in heaven with Washington there at the center, his legs wrapped in purple, surrounded by pagan deities, and a number of scenes that depicted various aspects of America in the 19th century. This was painted just after the Civil War, or actually during the Civil War. 1860 was when Brumidi began painting it. One of the scenes is an agricultural scene, which features the grain goddess Ceres. And there's a character there. It's about the 4 o'clock position as you're looking at that image, with the young character with the back to the viewer facing the grain goddess Ceres. He's wearing kind of a soft red cap.
Scroll down a little bit.
Phrygian cap. Yeah, be toward the bottom right corner. There you go. You're circling him there. That represents young America, okay? He is depicted the way Ganymede is depicted in the Greek and Roman art of the classical era. And you can look it up and you see that when Zeus in the form of an eagle is carrying Ganymede away, he's not just carrying Ganymede, if you catch my drift. Now, the reason this is significant in my view is that Zeus, who was the storm god, the king of the pantheon for the Greeks, equivalent to Jupiter, and the equivalent of Baal in the Canaanite pantheon, is the character identified by Jesus as Satan. Matthew 12, beginning at verse 22, Jesus is confronted, and the scribes and Pharisees say, well, he's casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul, which means Baal, the prince. And Jesus responds by saying, if Satan casts out demons by his own power, how will Satan's kingdom stand? And then you go to Revelation 2, verse 13, the letter to the church at Pergamum. Jesus says, through John, I know where you live, where Satan dwells. That's a reference to the great altar of Zeus. Again, the storm god, the Greek form of Baal. The reason the United States Capitol is called the Capitol, Capitol, is because that was the name of the temple of Jupiter in Rome, the Capitolium. Thomas Jefferson insisted we would name the building in which Congress meets the Capitol after the temple of Jupiter, the temple of Zeus, the temple of Baal, the temple of Satan. And then on the inside of the Capitol dome, you've got Ganymede representing young America, the one who is carried off to Olympus to become the submissive junior partner to Zeus, Satan. That's what's inside the Capitol dome here in the United States. I also argued, and did this in the previous book as well, The Second Coming of Saturn, that Washington, with his legs wrapped in purple, which is a symbol of royalty, is a representation of Saturn returning to herald a new golden age for the United States. And in the book, The Second Coming of Saturn, I go into some depth as to why I believe Saturn is to be equated with Shemiyaza, the leader of the sons of God in Genesis 6, the ones who rebelled, created the Nephilim, and also who will return someday as Apollyon or Abaddon when he emerges from the abyss. When Washington had passed on, it was intended that he would be put into a room in the crypt, which is the lower level of the U.S. Capitol, one floor below the rotunda. And in fact, there was a hole, a 10-foot diameter hole in the floor through which people in the rotunda could look down on George Washington. Except that before they could put Washington in that room, there was the War of 1812 and the British burned the Capitol. And by the time it was repaired and restored, Washington's descendants said, no, he's staying at Mount Vernon. So that hole in the floor is no longer there. But the idea was that Washington in the lower level would ascend through the portal, again, figuratively speaking, and then through the oculus to become a god heralding the golden age of America. I can't say with certainty, because I don't know what Brumidi's inspiration was, why he painted the apotheosis of Washington, which means Washington becoming a god. I suspect George Washington would have been mortified to be depicted this way, but that's what the symbolism represents. And again, young America depicted there on the inside of the dome of the temple of America's democracy, so-called anyway, by many of our political leaders after the January 6th riots a few years back, that Washington is there depicting the return of Shemiyaza, in other words, Abaddon, Apollyon, and young America as a submissive junior partner to Satan in all of this.
You know, it's so interesting, and you can get all the details right here, guys. The link is in the description. We got some questions we have to get to, Evan. I know we've got questions in the comments, and I want to get to some of these videos, but this has been so fascinating. I haven't want to. I'd love to spend 3 hours with you talking about this subject matter, and maybe we'll do that in the future. So, Evan, here in a moment, we're going to take a look at some of these comments who are here with us. But again, the link is in the description, guys, and I don't know. Maybe we'll show video of the UK researchers using geoengineering tech called Satan. Maybe we'll look at that here in a second, Evan. Can you go ahead and pull that up for us?
Absolutely. And I don't have any questions yet, so go ahead and throw your questions in the comment section.
Okay, great. Yeah, so let's pull up that video, and I think it's Russell Brand who's talking about this. And I'm hesitating because I saw Evan's head buried in the comments, and I figured he was digging something good out for you, and I'm sure he will here in a moment. But Go ahead and play that.
The researchers are using geoengineering tech called Satan, an acronym for stratospheric aerosol transport nucleation. Like, look, if you are a globalist and you're trying to defy the general view that you might be an evil force, organised, planned evil intelligence, do not call your sunlight blocking out technology Satan. Stratospheric aerosol transport and nucleation. Do you sometimes think they're actually taking the piss? Like they want us on some level to know that they're evil? Or do you sometimes wonder that there might be some sort of interdimensional pact where they're forced to declare publicly through Olympic ceremonies and weird sigils and signs and upside down goat heads on spaceships, like, oh, we told them though, we told them that we're evil, that somehow gives them a pass? I don't understand it all. I don't understand the occult. I don't understand esotericism. How can we understand? We have to work with the information that we're given. And you know that the information you're given is censored. You know that your movements and communications are surveilled. You know that something like this right now is being observed, scraped, all of your information, all of your data collected and collated. They might not need it now, but one day you might become a problem, and then they'll have that.
You know, his brain moves at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And that's one of the reasons why on clips like that I love listening to him. But he asked some interesting questions. Is there some sort of pact where they have to say these things out loud? When you hear about this, what are your thoughts about seeing that clip?
Well, I think he's making a point. I don't know whether it's a rule that they have to tell us what they're going to do in some sort of coded, backhanded way so that they can say, hey, look, the plans were available for you to view at the office down in the fifth, sub-basement, and behind the locked door. But it could be. He does make a point, though. I mean, why? Even if you're just being silly, would you want to put out the test of an experiment like this, and then create an acronym, create the acronym Satan to describe the title? The thing that blows me away, though, is I don't live in the UK, but we visited there for a couple of weeks back in 2019, and I'll tell you, they don't have an overabundance of sunlight in the UK. So why did they think this was a good idea? Here, let's block out even more sunlight for the UK. And in fact, the Keir Starmer government said is now going to allocate £50 million to continue this experimentation. So, it's bizarre. These are children playing with Tinker Toys and thinking that they've got the key to saving the Earth from global warming. It's
Which is why we need disruptors. Even if there's a politician that you personally dislike, if they're willing to disrupt this world order and this world agenda, then we've got to get behind that as much as we can, because it's getting out of control. And the things they're experimenting with yesterday, I think Trump signed, as a matter of fact, a ban on what's the phrase when you're crossing different and mutating different diseases. What's that phrase called? It just left me.
Oh, gain of function research.
Gain of function research. Banning gain of function research, which it's interesting to see whether or not there'll be some pushback from the left on this.
What's interesting, though, is that the Obama administration did the same thing, and they just offshored it. They just said, okay, well, we'll just send it to this organization here, and I forget the name of the
it was
group.
Wuhan.
And they took it to Wuhan, but there was another organization in between that the NIH gave the money to, and they took the research over to Wuhan. But this was not supposed to be done anyway. I think 2014, the Obama administration banned federal funding of this kind of research, and they just found a workaround, did it anyway.
Yeah, even after the smallpox scare of the early 2000s, it was this idea of banning it was revived, and then of course there was all these workarounds from secret agencies, and so it seems to come and go and come and go and come and go. But there's all kinds of nefarious things happening. This video is this is the clearest version of it. This has been out for some time, but the clarity of this video of I believe it's the Malaysian flight, MH370. I want you guys to take a look at this, and let's just hit play. So this is reportedly the last known footage, and you see some sort of orb or orbs. I think there's 3 of them. Yeah, there's 3 circling around the flight. And as we watch it, apparently some have suggested after looking at this video, some say it's doctored, some say it's not doctored at all. You're going to see the flight just blip out of the screen.
After these clouds here.
Yeah, it'll be after the clouds.
You see the triangular pattern.
And then gone. I don't know if you've seen that footage before, Brother Derek. But what are your thoughts about that?
No, I have not. Hard to say. I would. My first thought would be that it. Wow. Yeah, I've got no way to know whether that's legit or not.
I've seen some pretty interesting news agencies reporting on this, saying that they verified that the video doesn't appear to be doctored. But then again, we're living in an age where you can't really know what's going on. Of course, at the same time, the Pentagon is admitting that we have technology. We have, I don't know if they've directly come out and said we have zero-point gravity technology, or, but they've been talking a lot about the technologies that we have as a government. Have you heard a lot of these conversations and looked into some of these technologies the United States government is operating with?
Well, we've done a little digging into the work of DARPA and IARPA, which is similar to DARPA. These are the secret research projects of the Defense Agency, and IARPA is one that deals more with I forget what IARPA stands for. Sharon has done more digging into this than I have. But anyway, DARPA has been referred to by researcher and author Annie Jacobson as the Pentagon's brain. And some of the things that they're working on are, I think, worthy causes, like trying to restore mobility. There we go. Intelligence Advanced Research Projects activity. Within the DNI. If I remember correctly, they were trying to build like a simulation of the entire world. It's like the old Stephen Wright joke. You know, I've got a map of the world 1-to-1 scale. I keep it out in the yard. But they're trying to find ways of simulating human responses to various political stressors and predict what issues they might have to contend with. DARPA, they're not necessarily looking for new secret weapons. Sometimes it's projects to restore mobility to soldiers who've been injured or wounded. But that gets into things like brain implants and other such things. And if we are finding out about it now, the odds are that the actual research is probably 30 or 40 years ahead of where we think they are.
Correct. Yeah.
So, but we try not to get too far in our speculation. When we speculate, we say we're speculating. I am glad that we're working on some of these projects, but knowing, however, looking back at what has been publicly disclosed, especially since World War II, research into weaponizing the occult. Probably the best known is that movie that was played for laughs, sadly, because it's not very funny, The Men Who Stare at Goats, which is based on a movie
based on a true story.
Based on a book by John Ronson, right. And they were actually trying to teach men to kill with their minds, you know. And there was a general who was in charge of the project named Albert Stubblebine, who was trying to find ways to learn how to walk through solid objects, walk through walls and things like this. Well, yeah, if you're a soldier, that'd be a really great asset on the battlefield. You know, solid objects no longer an obstacle. But many of the projects they were working on dealt with the occult, for example, remote viewing and things like that. The American taxpayer, I think, would be shocked to find out how much of our money was put to research projects into the supernatural, that when you get right down to it, again, trying to weaponize the supernatural. Yeah. And this is something God made very clear almost 3,400 years ago. Hey, don't do this.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of our tax dollars are going toward funding Saul taking a trip to the witch at Endor, which is essentially what a lot of it is going to. And you look at, we're being conditioned for it with movies, not just what you mentioned, Men Who Stare at Goats, but even fictional, like Hellboy, for example, is a story that is based on the Germans attempting to do research into the occult. They accidentally open a portal, and this demonic entity comes out of the portal, and they use that demonic entity to fight other demonic entities. It's interesting that we're being programmed with things that have some relation to reality and to truth, which is why in the age of AI, we have got to make sure we stick close to prophetic voices and biblical voices that we know and that we trust, who are anchored in the Word of God, which is why we're thankful for you and for the writings that you do. And again, my desk here is just littered with books by you and your lovely wife, and we want everybody to take advantage of it. The Gates of Hell, the link is in the description of